Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to today's show. Today, we're excited to welcome someone who brings not only passion and heart to everything he does, but also powerful personal experience that fuels his advocacy. Mitch Holeve is a proud father of 3 boys, and it's his middle son, Garrett, who has Down syndrome, who first connected the family to the Best Buddies community back in middle school. That connection has grown over the years, with Garrett now thriving in a job through Best Buddies and continuing to be a strong advocate himself. Mitch's journey alongside Garrett inspired him to get involved with Eunie's Buddies, where he continues to volunteer and support others. Mitch, we're so glad to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun to be able to visit with you, a veteran, a legend in the Down syndrome space, a veteran with what you've been doing. This is pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. 35 years since my son was born, so and it come a long way. So it's awesome. It's been all good.
Yeah, no doubt. It truly has come a long ways. And so I actually want to start with a current item that you are working on and a project that you're involved in, and that's Eunie's Buddies. And this is a really neat thing that we just learned about a month ago at Rod's Heroes. Would you be able to share with us what Eunie's Buddies is?
Sure. Eunie's Buddies is part of the Best Buddies program. If you're not familiar, Best Buddies is a international organization that supports individuals with disabilities, and they have 5 pillars: friendship, jobs, lifestyle. The Eunie's Buddies falls under the family support pillar. It's pretty new as far as the Best Buddies goes, but just under a year old now. And what that is designed to do is to give new parents, somebody with a newborn or a young child, somebody that they can talk to that maybe has similar experiences they can use as a sounding board. And it's really a kind of a mentor program. So you get to share your experiences with somebody else that's a little bit younger and going through it for the first time.
Most definitely. It sounds incredible. I know for every family, whether their diagnosis is what I'd refer to as the lightning strike, which is often the case with Down syndrome, from one second to the next, you go from not having a child with Down syndrome to somebody telling you that your child has Down syndrome. And there's other diagnoses that I would say is more like a sunrise. And that is, I know in the case of our son, Ridge, who has Q, we didn't know Ridge had 22q, or at least didn't get the diagnosis until he was 3. But for 3 years, we wondered, and we were trying to connect the dots and piece the puzzle together on exactly what was going on there. Regardless, there is a time that all of us receive diagnosis, and it sounds like Eunie's Buddies is an organization, a program specifically designed to be able to be there for families when they receive that Down syndrome diagnosis. Is that correct?
Yeah, Down syndrome, or it could be another developmental delay, autism. Um, you know, so yeah, it would be there when you're looking around and saying, but we always kind of say, "Why me?" And it's only me. And I think it's good to be able to say, "Well, it's not just me," and have somebody that you can try to relate to.
Definitely. Mitch, I'd love to hear your motivation and your desire to get involved with this organization. Where did that really stem from?
It came from the fact that when Garrett was born, again, 35 years ago, was not anything even close to this available. Family support. I mean, 35 years ago, we were told the morning after he was born that, adoption is an option, something we should strongly consider. And my wife and I, that was a very impactful negative experience to have. And so much so that even that it hung over, it's always been there. And that the opportunity to give another parent to avoid that negative, I think is really what I clung to, is to be able to say to another parent in this situation, congratulations on your newborn and on your new kid. And, there's a lot of positive things that's going to happen. Just like with any child you have, there's going to be a lot of good and a lot of bad. Having that opportunity to do that to help another parent, I just kind of jumped at it because I could knock on anybody's door and say, hey, I have a kid with Down syndrome. What did you do with
Yes.
your child? There was nobody out there to really answer those questions.
So let's see, Garrett was born in, is it 1990 or 1989?
89.
In 1989. So he turned 35 already this year. That's, but he hasn't.
But
I've got
he'll be at 35 in October. He'll be
there
35 in
we
October.
go. I was like,
Yeah.
I've got my birthdays mixed up.
That's okay.
Born in 1989, right? And so some of our listeners, myself included, remember what 1989 was like. That was a lot different. That was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot different. And that's the other reason I think I was motivated to get involved in this, because it's a unique situation where you can actually say that, yeah, our family was a kind of a pioneer
Definitely.
in this inclusion battle. I mean, we're in so many different ways because of Garrett's goals and aspirations, but just anybody that we know, any of our peers that are now our age with our kids, they're the same way. So if we run into somebody that we met when we were younger, it's they were pioneers too, maybe not given the same opportunities that Garrett was to blaze that trail. And I think that was important. That's important too as I move forward, because I want to make sure new parents aren't afraid to help blaze a trail for a kid with IDD, just like they would for a typical kid. You're always going to help your kids.
That's right.
So I think it's important, because especially as a young parent, you get so inundated about therapies and everything else. And you just kind of have to keep in mind what you're doing is the same thing you would do for a typical child, which is setting that trail for them to follow so they can be successful in life.
Most definitely.
And that was what was important to me.
So, how long do you recall after Garrett was born did the hospital come to you and talking about considering adoption? Was that like essentially the
Uh,
same day immediately, or
it was. So Garrett was born pretty late in the evening. So I went home thinking that I just had my second son. He was healthy and fine. His APGARD scores were like 8, 9. So no clue. You second healthy son. Next morning, I get the call. I get to the hospital. And that's when we found out, was the next morning, is that they came in, the doctor came in and, told us he had Down syndrome. At that time, genetic testing took even twice as long as this. So any of those doubts that you have in your mind even took longer to overcome. So yeah, it was the very next morning, and scared the poop out of me. My wife was in the hospital. So yeah, it went from what you said. It was a bomb, because you go home thinking, okay, especially after having the second child and having a positive experience and a healthy son the first time, go home the same way. It's okay, you know,
yeah,
and then the next morning you get that. So that's a shock to this system.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And they dropped the bombshell. Everything at that time was, if you have any, and I relate this to this. So the first person that was ever on TV with Down syndrome was Chris Burke.
Hmm.
Okay. And he's kind of a legend in the
Yes.
Down syndrome community, but he wasn't even around then. So it wasn't even like, I saw no YouTube, no social. So you don't know. I mean, Mongolism and everything else was still prevalent back then. And so, yeah, and it kind of, as you mentioned that, again, that keeps bringing me back to, wow, I love seeing where things are today. And I think it's important for people to realize, especially new parents, that they realize a lot of progress, but you got to keep pushing. You
Yeah.
got to keep
Well, and
pushing.
that's something that I see you doing right now. I mean, you're very involved with Unie's buddies and being able to help these families when they receive diagnosis be able to just understand and connect the dots the best that they can and just have a place of community is probably more than anything that I see that is. I think that's a pretty incredible thing. So let's talk a little bit about Garrett. Garrett is something else. I'd encourage all of our listeners to check out his Instagram because it is very entertaining. In fact, I'm going to actually read, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm going to read his description, and this will give you a really good idea. So I'm going to describe what I'm seeing. But when you look at Garrett's Instagram, you got a picture of him pulling up his shirt and showing his six pack. And like this kid clearly works out, which in Down syndrome, for anybody to have a six pack in general is pretty incredible. But if somebody with Down syndrome has a six pack, that's getting after it. And so his description is G Money's Vintage Closet. And so he's got an eBay page. He's got his own store on there. Next is All Around Badass, which just says a lot about Garrett, right? And then Adaptive Athlete, and then MMA and Vintage Clothes. Next is T Strong, and then there's a link to his eBay store. And so that's Garrett. Like, I think that's a great introduction into
There's,
Garrett, right?
I don't even know if you can see it, but that's you're never going to be able to see. This is lousy, but anyway, there's also a link to our website there where you can go underneath. There's two links, so if anybody wants to see his story, there are some documentaries that are up there from ESPN and The Guardian that talk about his journey,
Yeah.
which was interesting, amazing, and interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible. So, what would you like the world to know about your son?
First and foremost, my son wouldn't let me down if I didn't describe him as a real fighter, both in and out the cage. And I think that describes him the best. If you don't know anything about his journey, Garrett's the only person with Down syndrome to ever fight in sanctioned mixed martial arts events, what you would call UFC, in real life sanctioned events, and when people see that or hear the history on that, or when they see him currently doing jiu-jitsu or martial arts training on his Instagram account, that's what they see. The underlining story on that is that in order to get those sanctioned events, he had to hire a lawyer and he had to go to court in the state of Florida to fight for his right to enter the cage. And he sat in front of a judge to told the judge that it's okay if somebody punches me in the face because I can defend myself and I'm not intellectually disadvantaged enough not to understand the consequences of these actions.
Yeah,
And this is what I want to do with my life. And this was like 14 years ago.
that's incredible.
And that's really what's motivated me to continue this because of what he had to go through to do a simple, I mean, as an amateur or recreational activity, if he wanted to play football at his high school, it would have been the same thing. He would have had the same resistance, I'm sure, especially back then. So that's why I call Garrett a fighter in and out of the cage, because he's willing to fight for what he wants, no matter what. And he kind of lives his life independently that way. He doesn't like to be dictated to in any way. So yeah.
So, where do you think that fire came from, Mitch?
It's definitely part of DNA. I think it's a couple parts DNA. It's DNA that he gets from mom and dad, and it's also the DNA from the 21st chromosome, if you ask me. So it's kind of like that's his superpower, because although he has his chromosome, if you ever see anytime he's ever asked about it, he wants to ignore it. It doesn't exist. He doesn't care about it. It's not an obstacle to him. And I think that having that obstacle always around just makes him very tenacious at things. He's just like, no, you're not going to tell me I can't, just because that's your perception of it. Almost to a fault, almost to a fault where you can be so stubborn that, yeah, I'm going to do everything myself and never ask for help. So yeah, that's where it's a combination of things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I can see that just in a little bit that I know about you. I can see that you also are one that will stand up for what you believe is right and be able to defend what you think is absolutely the right thing. And so I see Garrett following in your footsteps. And I also agree on the extra copy of this extra love in the chromosome is all based in a lot of stubbornness as well, that can be a little bit challenging at times, but in most of the cases very, very powerful, the superpower in essence.
Yeah, it really is like you said, the stubbornness not to give up, to constantly learn. And again, it's something, going back to Eunie's buddies, that's something I can share with new parents, because they're never going to be able to understand that as a new parent. I get that too, because you open up textbooks or whatever, you're going to see a lot of negative things. So you have to understand that you go back to his physique, okay, because that was something as my experience, always being involved in sports, when we were first told he would have like really low muscle tone and never be able to do that well, for me, it was never a question because we were always in the gym. I was always in the gym working out, and he was in the gym with me. And that was just one of those things that we're not really going to listen to, me being, this is one of the funniest things I'll share with you that I share with new parents is that because I had a lot of ignorance, probably a lot. I mean, zero knowledge, you know, of of Down syndrome or in general, just typical male. I was 25 years old, so I wouldn't know anything. That ignorance was really the thing that made the difference for us, for Garrett and I, because there was never going to be a limitation that anybody was going to put out there because I wasn't going to listen to what somebody told me from a textbook. Wanted to go to the gym, we're going to work out. Okay, let's work out. I don't care what the textbook says. And yeah, if you go to look at him online and you look at him today and he's not the only one, which is the great thing, but he's 35 years old and he probably still walks around with like 8% body fat.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and it also shows the thing that amazes me is the discipline. Wears me into the ground at 63 years old, still having to
Yeah.
because I've trained him as his coach, as his strength coach, pretty much his whole life, and not as I tell people because it was one as a profession. I was a strength and conditioning coach, and he's my best client ever.
Hmm.
The easiest and best client ever because you had the control over him when he's not in the gym to say, what do you eat? And I can see what you're eating now and whatnot.
Yes.
And you could see those results pay off when he put into it. So it was always cool because he's always a good example for somebody that's trying to do that. And I'm not a small guy. I can put on some pounds, so I know that battle, but he's always been able, that's the one thing that he's always brought to the table when he walks into the gym is people like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. There's really no excuses. You can't make those excuses. And we've always lived our life like
So, Mitch, you touched on this briefly. I think it'd make a lot of sense to dive into it more. I'd love to hear what you say in those situations where you have a family, a dad that you're meeting with, brand new father, just received diagnosis. What is it that you really want to convey to these families as you visit with them?
I think that I really want to convey happiness. It's a positive event, no matter what you may have to endure. You have to understand, first and foremost, that having a child is risky business from before birth to after birth to even when they're grown up. It's, my kids are old. I still worry about them. That's the first thing I like to tell them, especially if they've never had a child before. If you've never had a child before and you're born with a child with a disability and you're looking at it, you can really, it's one of my favorite words is it's really good to awfulize. This is an awful situation. This is just so bad. It's so scary. Well, you never thought about it because getting pregnant and you think about these happy thoughts, you think about my kid become astronaut, president, the
That's right.
CEO, he's going to be president of his class because that's what we do as people and as parents. But I kind of come at it the other way is guess what? Because this is the way I looked at it, having an older son from the very get-go is I never knew what my older son was going to turn out to be. I could be a great parent, but I still have no control over that. And we taught our kids is that they had to be productive members of society. That was your goal. My goal as a parent is to make you a productive member of this society. It's all the best I can do. Keep you out of jail. That was like, if you're productive, you stay out of jail,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
Step
So
one.
guess what? I worried about that with my older son and my younger son. You worry about them going out on the streets. They go to high school, they get in the beef in high school. These days you had to worry about more things in school than we did.
Totally.
That's one of the first things I point out to the new parent is like, it's scary, but guess what? It's not scary because you have a kid with a disability. Having a kid is scary. Nobody ever told you this before because if they did, you probably wouldn't have the child.
Right.
They told you what that responsibility. I don't have to tell you, you have a handful plus some, but you knew every time you brought another child into your family what you were getting yourself into, good and bad. And you knew what the negative side was. So it was no surprises for you,
That's right.
right? When you're having a new newborn and you have nothing, only happiness, because again, society puts away that sadness so you don't get to see it in public. So I almost scare them like, oh my God, this was really scary. Why did we decide to have kids anyway? And then the next thing I like to say is, guess what? Congratulations, you're going to be a parent. And if you do a good job, your kid's going to grow up to be a star. And that's the only thing you should worry about, is being a really good parent and shoot for those stars, because that's all you can do. You can't control every day of their life or anything in between. And that's really the thing that I try to do first and foremost, is like, wait, I'm going to scare you a little bit, because being a parent is scary.
Totally.
Getting the call, getting the call about Garrett is scary, but getting the call from my younger son, had an accident at a friend's house, severed an artery in his vein.
Ooh,
They're taking him in the ambulance, blood's flying all open. I get to the hospital. They're like, well, he may lose the leg. That's scary.
that is scary.
He has no disabilities. That was scary, So you have to realize that. And then I'm also in a position to say, well, look, my son is 35 years old, and I'm really lucky because I have my best friend. He's, whether he continues to live with us or not, I'll have a stronger bond with him than my other kids. And that's something that, like, no disrespect to my other kids or whatever, but they just can't control it because he's around. We did a lot of things together. He was more open to spending time with me during high school, when, a typical kid would not be. He's not. He's embarrassed by dad, but he'll live with him.
So one question that I have, just probably more curiosity, personal curiosity. Typically, kids with Down syndrome, adults with Down syndrome tend to be like pretty lovable guys. Like they're open to giving you a hug. Like these kids, boys or girls, usually are pretty big into hugs. They're pretty cuddly kids, interesting, in that respect, and something we love about them. And so I'd actually love to hear on Garrett. Like you definitely are like a man's man, and I love how you've raised your child. Much of what you believe and what you instill in your children is something that I 100% embrace as well. But do you see with Garrett, like, is he still one that's going to give dad a big hug, or is he like, nope, not going to do that?
Yeah, no, 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 no. He's a really good balance.
Uh huh.
He's an awesome balance in that way, because I think that I understand what you're saying, and I'll answer I'm going to be honest in my answer to your question.
Yeah.
We were never big on him running up to giving people hugs,
Uh huh.
okay? Because it's not appropriate. And again, when he was born, we were never. I hate to. I'm gonna go a far field on this, but you may find it's going to be good for new parents if they're watching. Okay, so yes, Garrett will give me a hug. Okay, number one, he's a great reader of emotions, and he's always there to support you, and when you need the support. But one of the things that we were concerned about, shows you the differences, that we were never talked to about his education. It's never about reading, writing, or arithmetic 35 years ago. Okay. It was about inclusion. That was your best, what they would call then. It was first about, hey, can you keep him? But we were more concerned about, because the picture we were told is your kid going to, all the things that we think about or hear in those horror stories. Is your kid going to be screaming in the middle of the store? Is he going to be picking his nose at difficult times? Um, all those social behaviors, those are the things that we, as parents, right or wrong, because of that time,
It's interesting.
we did not want him to be embarrassed in public.
Yeah.
We can hide our intelligence, okay? We can hide our fear, okay? If we're accepted into society.
Yeah.
If you can walk into the room and have some way to be accepted in that room, understand what appropriate behavior is at the time. So you asked me about Garrett hugging. Garrett has a great sense of humor. We constantly ride each other, he and I. I mean, it can be like the world's worst locker room here, really. And poor mom, even at this point, she's like worn out from it. But we're having a good time, and and he just gives it right back to you. So he's not shy about that, but he also understands about, hey, it's appropriate to say one thing to me while we're at the house. Okay, if he wants to play slap butt or he slaps my butt on the way out or whatever, that's appropriate in the house. But you don't want to be able to take that behavior outside because that's going to get you in trouble. So for Garrett, growing up, fitting in socially was something that we really worked on and we're very proud of. And I think that's really allowed him to get accepted into society because um, I see smart people that are often not accepted into society just because they don't know what social norms are,
Right.
and that can be a lonely life.
For sure.
No, for I don't want everybody to think, oh, we all have to be accepted in society by everybody, but you have to find your place where you're comfortable in society to be happy.
For sure. Yeah,
And
for
that's
sure.
all we wanted him for, to be happy and to find a place for. And again, kind of funny, goes to find friends, to find buddies. How are you going to find friends? Who are you going to pick up the phone when you want to go, training 4 nights a week, or your buddies there or not?
That's right.
So and being in the gym, it's why every parent's told to sign up their kids for sports, boys, girls, So you learn a lot from sports. And he was signed up with T-ball with his younger brother. They played on the same T-ball team, so we had inclusion at an early age. So yeah, and I'm not hard. People ask me all the time, it's like, well, you're kind of old school and everything else. I'm like, I'm not really old school. It's just that I understand if Garrett was never born, I probably wouldn't come off like this.
Yeah.
But I understand what he needs to do in life to get by. And that's kind of tightened up my regimen a little bit. I can't act like too much of a fool because I have to worry about the way it embarrasses him. My other kids, I don't have to worry about, you
Right.
know, they're their own men.
No, that's great insight. I think you've done a great job with Garrett. And Garrett truly is singing that song he's meant to sing. He's being who he is. He's being part of that legacy for his family, and he's definitely carrying that flag forward in a very incredible way that you should be very proud of. I have one last question before I let you go. You told me you were born in Philly, and then you moved to Miami, and so I'm a baseball guy. You got to tell me who your baseball team is. Philly, Marlins. What do you
But see, it's my baseball team's the Phillies
Yep.
because growing up, there was no Marlins number one. So I still was a Philly kid. So the Phillies were always my team. And so that was all, still to this day, it's my number one team. Marlins are number two. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to World Series games here that the Marlins were at.
Amazing.
So, but they're a hard team nowadays to be a fan of. So it's kind of like you want to. So yeah, that's an easy one. I'm still a Philly fan, but we're Dolphin fans when it comes to.
Oh yeah, can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Good for
So
you. Yeah, good for you, Mitch. Mitch, this has been an incredible conversation. I would say that just in summary and recapping a few thoughts here, the way that you have raised Garrett is largely why I started the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast, meaning that oftentimes parents are their own worst enemy for their children with intellectual disabilities, meaning that parents are the ones that hold their children back from truly being able to accomplish what they are capable of accomplishing. What I see with you, Mitch, is the complete opposite in the fact that I would say you're probably even a little more, I would say, aggressive with Garrett than you are with your other kids, aggressive in a positive way of helping him to truly realize the full measure of his potential. And as a result, he's making waves. He's doing some incredible things in being able to change what society says individuals with an intellectual disability are capable of doing. Very much in a way, you were a pioneer 35 years ago, and you're a pioneer even today with pushing your son and helping him to sing that song that he's meant to sing. So, super proud and thankful for the chance to be able to have you on the show today.
I appreciate it, Brady. I enjoyed it. All the best to you and your family too.
Absolutely. And, we are going to be in Miami. I'm thinking next year.
Okay.
We've already got the invite for Coop to come throw out the first pitch at the Marlins game. And so
Nice.
we're planning on that being a 2026 campaign. So when we're in town, we
Let
got
me
to
know.
come out to the game with us.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Love baseball. Big, huge baseball. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. Good luck.
Absolutely. Well, Mitch, it's been a pleasure to be able to have you on the show. I'd encourage everybody to check out Garrett's Instagram. In fact, I'll tell you his handle right now, Garrett at Garrett's Fight. So
Yeah.
2 R's, 2 P's, Garrett's Fight.
Garrett's fight is Googleable.
That's right.
You can Google it. It's Googleable. It's more than the page.
I like it. I like it. I like it. Well, Mitch, I appreciate you being on
Appreciate it.
today. Great to have you.
You too. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.